Hello friends, welcome to Unacademy. Let's crack NEET PG. I'm Dr. Shonali Chandra, and in this video I will be taking up a case scenario based approach to hyperemesis gravidarum, and I've highlighted my referral code here, which is SHONALI. So if you take on Unacademy subscription, you can use this code to avail a 10% discount in a subscription package. I've also highlighted my Telegram link, which is our channel's link, where you can post your doubts and queries on this Telegram channel here. And you can also download the Unacademy Learning app on your mobile phones, get notified about upcoming courses and upcoming special live classes on the platform. On the platform, you'll get daily live classes where you can chat with your educator, interact, ask your doubts and queries, all the while that the class is going on. So it's like a live classroom experience. The courses are structured, keeping in line with the latest NEET PG syllabus. There are also live tests and quizzes that keep getting conducted on the platform on a regular basis, so you can evaluate your performance as you go along. And most importantly, one-time subscription, if you take, gives you an unlimited access. So for that much duration, you can watch all the live sessions from all the faculties and who are active on the platform. And even if you miss out on the live sessions, you can always go back and watch the recorded versions from the comfort of your own devices. Top educators are associated with the platform. All subjects that we need to prepare for our post-grad entrance exams, they're covered. And every now and then, comprehensive batch courses as well as short duration crash courses, they keep getting launched. So you can check out the batches that have recently started on the platform as well. So you can see there's an intensive revision batch for the upcoming NEET PG. There's a target batch specifically for FMG preparation. There's a target next batch also for the exam, a long batch course for the exam that is going to take place in 2022 as well. There's a target batch for INI CET for 2021 as well. So you can check out these ongoing batches. And there are various modules of subscription. You can take the Iconic subscription also, which allows you to access Unacademy and Prep Ladder both at the same time. Now you can take this Iconic subscription for 12, 18, 24 or 36 months duration, and if you subscribe using my code, you can avail a 10% discount on your subscription package as well. And let me tell you about the other NEET PG plus subscription packages. Well, if you're targeting the upcoming exams, upcoming NEET exam, you need a short duration crash course, then you can take the 1 or 3 month duration package depending on your needs and requirements. For those of you who are targeting the next exams, then you can take the longer duration 12 months package. You see, it will give you ample time to go through all of the sessions, will also leave you enough time in the end to revise. And as you can see, on a monthly basis, it turns out to be more economical also. And for those of you who are in your third year or final year MBBS, or juggling hospital schedules and clinics and classes, or you're working simultaneously, so you're juggling hospital duties also at the same time, you want a slower pace of preparation, you can take the 24 months package. It turns out to be far more economical in the longer run. And you subscribe using my code, then you can avail a 10% discount on your subscription package as well. While you are on the platform, you can check out the special classes that I've already undertaken on the platform. There are various capsule courses there on the platform already. To access them, you'll have to subscribe to the Plus courses, and you can use my referral code to avail a 10% discount on that package. So coming back to the video at hand, we'll talk about hyperemesis gravidarum in today's session. So what is hyperemesis? Emesis is the act of vomiting and hyper is excessive, right? So how excessive should the vomiting be to be able to be called as hyperemesis? So any vomiting, that is severe enough. I mean, see, the various definitions regarding one criteria would be if there are more than 3 episodes of vomiting in a day in pregnant women. But any vomiting, you see, that is severe enough to cause weight loss, severe enough to disrupt her daily activities, severe enough that she's not able to take orally at all. Whatever she eats, she pukes it out immediately. Severe enough to cause dehydration, severe enough to land her into ketosis or alkalosis. You see, when you had vomiting, you're vomiting out the gastric content. So loss of hydrogen ions there in the the vomitus, you see, will lead to alkalosis. And at a later point in time, if this vomiting even continues further and further, you see, later on there can be acidosis as well because of starvation ketosis. You see, if a woman is not eating anything, and therefore, she's consuming, breaking down fatty acids for an energy requirements, and in that process ketone bodies form, right? So later on acidosis can also happen because of starvation ketosis, so keep this in mind as well. And hypokalemia, obviously, if loss of potassium ions in the vomitus can also trigger electrolyte imbalances like hypokalemia. So vomiting that is severe enough to cause any of these symptoms is what we call as hyperemesis. Now, what is the cause of this hyperemesis? Now, nausea and vomiting during pregnancy is something that happens to every pregnant lady to some degree or the other, and usually it is mild. It peaks at around 8 to 10 weeks of gestation, and it settles down once the beta hcg levels have returned to a plateau level at around 16 weeks. Much of the nausea vomiting is going to settle down, right? So many causes have been implicated for this hyperemesis. Well, it is multifactorial in in origin, because you see, there's some genetic component to it also, which is quite unexplained as of now. Then there is also the tendency of having emesis pertaining to certain environmental factors, like a woman can get nauseated, or the vomiting reflux could be initiated with certain smells, with certain special kinds of food, which could be different for different categories of women. And other than that, yes, of course, when there is excessive hcg, so normal nausea vomiting in pregnancy also because of the pregnancy hormones, estrogen, progesterone, as well as beta hcg, you see, they trigger this nausea and vomiting. So whenever there is excessive hcg, like for example in twin pregnancies or in molar pregnancies, the risk of having hyperemesis is also more. For example, hyperemesis will also be exacerbated if a woman is already having hyperthyroidism. So if a woman who is having thyrotoxicosis, hyperthyroidism, then in those cases it has been seen that her emesis or her vomiting in pregnancy is more likely to become hyperemesis. So it is exacerbated with hyperthyroidism. It is exacerbated with diabetes mellitus as well. So some women who are already diabetic, they go on to get pregnant, I mean, they could suffer from vomiting which is more than normal. So it is exacerbated. There are various reasons for it. The two reasons which come straight to mind is diabetes mellitus leads to gastroparesis. So especially if there is if it is associated with gastroparesis, I mean, then it could be a reason why the vomiting of pregnancy is getting exacerbated with diabetes mellitus. And also if there is ketoacidosis, also if there is diabetic ketoacidosis, then of course it is going to exacerbate the nausea and vomiting of pregnancy, and will become an urgent medical condition as well at the same time. And any coexistent gastrointestinal illness, for example, if a pregnant woman already has a peptic ulcer disease, already has a gastroesophageal reflux disease, I mean, obviously she will be more bothered, or she will be she will have more problems with nausea and vomiting in pregnancy. So yes, it has multifactorial origin. In situations with excessive beta hcg, there are more likely chances that a woman will have hyperemesis. It's exacerbated with hyperthyroidism, pregnant women with diabetes mellitus, and coexistent gastrointestinal illness as well. Now, for most of the women with nausea and vomiting in pregnancy, even with hyperemesis, you see, with routine treatment, it should settle down. But yes, sometimes when there are severe cases of hyperemesis, right, or refractory cases of hyperemesis which are not responding to treatment, then there can be a set of complications which can occur. Serious complications can also occur. So you need to keep this in mind as well, like dehydration. If a woman is not able to maintain her hydration at all, severe refractory cases, it can trigger acute kidney injury as well. Excessive vomiting and that retching, and that act of vomiting itself, can create situations where you can have a diaphragmatic rupture. You might end up having esophageal rupture because of that bouts of excessive vomiting, right? And that retching that is associated with vomiting can lead to esophageal rupture. Now these will become, surgical emergencies actually. Tears in the lower esophageal lining can lead to GI bleed also, like Mallory Weiss tears can also be there. Or hypothrombinemia has also been seen as a severe complication of severe refractory cases. This will happen because of vitamin K deficiency, because a woman is not eating orally, right? And Wernicke's encephalopathy because of thiamine deficiency, vitamin B1 deficiency, right? So these are complications which will happen only and only in severe refractory long-standing cases, but you need to keep them in mind as well. Now, moving on further, let's have a look at this case. There's a 26-year-old primary gravida at 2 months gestation who presents to the OPD with complaints of multiple episodes of vomiting for the past 3 days. What's the differential diagnosis for somebody who's coming with multiple episodes of vomiting for the past 3 days? Of course, it could simply be nausea and vomiting associated with pregnancy, could be hyperemesis. So you have pregnancy associated hyperemesis, right? Gastrointestinal causes by themselves can also lead to exacerbated nausea, vomiting. So you also have to think about possibility of gastritis or coincidental medical causes or gastrointestinal causes like cholecystitis, appendicitis, hepatitis, pancreatitis. I mean, you could have any of these gastrointestinal conditions could present with multiple episodes of vomiting, especially if there is associated with diarrhea. You also think in terms of the possibility of having gastroenteritis or food poisoning. So these should be in your mind as well. Urinary tract infection, cystitis, and pyelonephritis. I mean, they can also present with multiple episodes of vomiting as well. So she could be having a urinary tract infection. Diabetic ketoacidosis by itself can present with multiple episodes of vomiting. Thyrotoxicosis could present with multiple episodes of vomiting. So keep these differential diagnoses in mind as well, because it is important to rule out these possible differential diagnoses while you're taking a history and doing an examination. And one of the differential diagnosis is ovarian torsion. Don't rule this possibility out completely. I mean, there can be a possibility of ovarian torsion along with pregnancy, so that would be a gynecological cause. But yes, these are your various common differential diagnoses that you need to consider. Therefore, when a woman comes to the OPD with complaints of multiple episodes of vomiting for the past 5 days or past 3 days, you do have to ask her about, you have to ascertain whether it is hyperemesis or not. So you have to ask her whether she's been able to eat or not, right? Is she tolerating solids, or is she puking at even the liquids? Even she's having intolerability to keep liquids inside also. The character of the vomitus will guide you whether it is bilious vomiting or is it non-bilious vomiting, right? So if it's a bilious vomiting, you start thinking about the possibility of gastrointestinal causes more likely, right? Associated symptoms, is there retching along with it? Is there an aversion to particular smells, particular foods, right? So that would also be important to note. Ask her if she's having a decreased urinary output. I mean, ask her, how many times did she pass urine? I mean, that will give you an idea about whether or not this emesis is significant enough to cause a dehydration enough to cause a decreased urine output. So ask her that. Ask her about history of epigastric pain, diarrhea, fever. Fever would go more in terms of infection, right? Pyelonephritis, and your hepatitis. These can present with fever as well. Abdominal pain, could be in the lower abdomen, suprapubic area could mean a urinary tract infection. In the flank, pain could mean a pyelonephritis. On the right hypochondrium could mean a cholecystitis, right? So you have to be on a lookout for these associated symptoms as well, and ask about the history of dysuria as well. So let's say And you also have to ask her about a history of whether she's a known diabetic, whether she's a known hyperthyroid, so that could explain her multiple episodes of vomiting. So initial evaluation should definitely focus on these points in the history. And also any treatment that has been taken earlier. See, she's been having this problem for past 5 days. Maybe she did visit some general practitioners before this, and maybe she has been taken some treatment earlier, and maybe the treatment is not working and now she's come to you again. So history of taking any treatment earlier should also be elicited. Now, what are the points to be noted on examination? Signs of dehydration, very important key feature. You see, you have to note signs of dehydration, sunken eyes, or shriveled skin. That would be obviously say the skin turgor you have to see. So signs of dehydration, one quick guide would be to check the pulse rate and the BP with dehydration. You can have tachycardia, you can have low BP with dehydration. And once you have tachycardia or a low BP, you should also be thinking about measuring the temperature, because fever, you see, you will have to note the temperature also. Pallor or jaundice, right? So, jaundice would go more in favor of medical causes of the nausea, vomiting, if there is severe jaundice that you can elicit on clinical examination. However, a hyperemesis gravidarum by itself does not always lead to jaundice. And mild degree of liver dysfunction can be there with severe cases of hyperemesis gravidarum, but that would not be severe enough to cause a visible severe jaundice. But you should be on the lookout for jaundice as well, because if you find that, think about possible medical causes. A basic thyroid examination, you should be noting if there is a thyrotoxic nodule there. That would be self-explanatory. So don't think that you can just do a general physical examination of the woman as well. Check the weight and kind of if she has had a prior visit earlier, if she knows a pre-pregnancy weight, then you can assess whether she's been losing weight or not. So check the weight, do an abdominal examination, at least do a basic abdominal examination to look for tenderness, to look for tenderness in the various areas that we described, to rule out the medical causes, and do an examination to rule out the medical causes of excessive vomiting, and also to check for the uterine size. Right now, maybe she says she has 2-month amenorrhea, and maybe she has a uterus size which is larger than the expected period of amenorrhea. Then you start thinking in terms of possibility of having a molar pregnancy, right? And if you think in terms of that possibility, you want to do an ultrasound much sooner, right? So do an abdominal examination as well. Keep the possibility of molar pregnancy or multiple pregnancy in mind as well, and do a basic pelvic examination to look again for the size of the uterus, and to look also whether there is any evidence of any adnexal mass which is tender, could be adnexal torsion. So have a look at the size of the uterus, have a look at the adnexa as well, right? So keep these important features in mind as well. Now let's say for example in our case, we found that we have a 26-year-old woman, primigravida, at 2 months gestation with hyperemesis. She's not even tolerating fluids. Her pulse rate is 110. BP is 90/50. She is afebrile. The abdominal examination is normal. A basic pelvic examination showed you did a perspeculum examination. Cervix is healthy. Your uterus corresponds to 8-week size. There is no adnexal. There is no adnexal mass or tenderness. So now with this basic, history and examination in place, I'm thinking more in terms of the possibility of hyperemesis gravidarum, pregnancy associated hyperemesis, right? However, how do I manage this woman now? She is having tachycardia, she's having BP on the lower side, she's also not able to tolerate even fluids, so she needs to be admitted and then managed. That is very, very important to note. and you send a baseline investigations in place. You do send a complete blood count, you send a baseline liver function test to check for hepatic enzymes and bilirubin levels. A baseline RBS should definitely be done to check whether she's hypoglycemic because of lack of glucose, or whether she is diabetic who's probably having ketoacidosis. So baseline investigations should be done, and baseline evaluation of the kidney function tests like blood urea and serum creatinine and serum electrolytes like sodium potassium chloride, they should also be a part of your basic workup in such cases of hyperemesis where you are needing to admit the woman to manage her. And basically also at the offset, just send for a urine routine microscopy. That will help you rule out the possibility of urinary tract infection. And you also want to check the urine ketone levels. You want to see if there is ketonuria, because that would also tell you about the severity of the hyperemesis and the ketosis. So what are the indications for hospitalization you need to remember? So mild cases of excessive vomiting, they can be managed on the OPD basis. But indications for hospitalization, like in our case, where a woman cannot even tolerate fluids, where she is not responded to oral treatment, maybe she took treatment and she's not responding to it, severe dehydration, ketonuria, electrolyte imbalances. Now, these are indications for hospitalization. Therefore, after a basic history taking examination, it is important to send for the baseline investigations and operate and get the reports soon as well. And an ultrasound to evaluate for the fetal well-being or to find molar pregnancy or twin pregnancy can be done after the baseline investigations have been sent, right? And what will you institute? What will you institute as part of the therapeutic management? Well, of course, you'll have to go for fluid and electrolyte replacement. So that you will get guided by, monitoring the woman's pulse rate, BP, checking for dehydration. So fluid resuscitation in the form of IV fluids, in the form of Ringer lactate and normal saline, that has to be given. So you have to manage her dehydration. If there is electrolyte imbalances, you have to treat that electrolyte imbalance as well. Antiemetics you will institute. Now, if you are admitting the woman, she is not able to tolerate orally, in this particular case, you will give preference to parenteral antiemetics because she's not able to tolerate orally at all. So you can give her injectable promethazine. We can give her a metoclopramide. If promethazine is not working, she's not getting relieved on that, you can give metoclopramide, or you can give injectable ondansetron also. So you'll have to maintain round the clock antiemetics also. And apart from this, vital charting, you have to see whether your fluid replacement is working or not. So you have to keep checking the woman's pulse rate and BP, ensure that she's doing better, visit her bedside, right? Urine ketone charting should also be done at least, basically, at least 3 times a day to begin with. So let's say in our case, the woman had, for example, severe hyperemesis, she had dehydration, and let's say, for example, if we go back and assume that all her reports came out to be normal, except that, let's say, her urine ketone came out to be moderate, okay, and rest investigations like your complete blood count and your baseline LFT, KFT, and serum electrolytes, they all came normal, right? So you should be repeating this urine ketone charting as well to see whether your fluid resuscitation is working or not working. So you have to continue on this fluid management. You have to continue on this fluid management till she is feeling better, right? She's less of nauseous, right? And at least, till your urine ketones, they are normalized, right? So you're measuring them routinely, you're doing urine ketone charting at least 3 times a day. So till your urine ketones are normal, you continue on this fluid management, and then as and when she starts feeling better and the urine ketones have settled down, then you can resume oral feeding slowly. you can resume oral feeding slowly as and when she feels better. It will usually take about 24, at least, try this fluid management for at least 24 to 48 hours before instituting oral feeding slowly. Right, so you can give that try and see if she can take small meals, right? And obviously you can see sometimes, if she has a preference for a particular kind of food, I mean, that could be tried. So small snacks can be tried to be incorporated, plain biscuits can be tried. So these are the kind of foods that you can give her. Solid food, plain bland foods to begin with, so that any spices or any sort of smell of the food does not trigger a nausea or vomiting in her. So slowly you are going to resume the oral feeding as well. And you can resume the oral feeding along with the antiemetics in place, and as and when she starts feeding orally and she's feeling better, you can slowly taper off the antiemetics as well. And input and output charting monitoring during this acute phase of management is also very important. I mean, you don't want to end up not monitoring the input and output charting, and the woman ending up getting dehydration induced acute kidney injury. So baseline management will take care of all of these aspects when you are managing hyperemesis gravidarum also. So you have to be on a lookout for possible medical causes, also to rule them out based on history and clinical examination. And the management will focus on giving her treatment for dehydration, giving her treatment for vomiting, settling her down in the immediate 24 to 48 hours, and then slowly resuming oral feeding, and also keep a lookout for urine output and input charting as well. And at the same time, in severe cases like the case that I described to you, where IV hydration is being required, where ketones are moderate, where dehydration has set in, you should also be adding thiamine. Also add thiamine, 100 milligrams of thiamine, which can be put diluted in 1 liter of crystalloid solution. So you are giving that RL or NS, you're giving that fluid management. To that VAC, you can add 100 milligrams of thiamine to prevent against thiamine deficiency and Wernicke's encephalopathy. Right, so this is how you're going to manage this particular case of hyperemesis gravidarum. Now, for mild nausea and vomiting, which is not requiring hospitalization, so the indications of hospitalization would be considered. Let's say a woman has mild nausea, vomiting, but it does not require hospitalization. She's not dehydrated, she's having normal urine output, she's able to tolerate liquids also, she's able to take in liquid diet, she's able to retain solid diet also. Then in that case, simple dietary modification can work. You can ask her to take small frequent meals, instead of having big major meals, just small frequent meals distributed throughout the day. Eat whatever she likes, and she can avoid the foods which are trigger foods for her. Right, and basically the frequent meal should have a higher protein content, and a low fat content should definitely be there, and they should be bland initially to begin with, and then one can start avoid spicy or hot food, especially here, because then they trigger gastritis and they can even further worsen the nausea and vomiting. And at the offset, pyridoxine, that is vitamin B6 oral treatment with pyridoxine, which can be given at bedtime, can be tried, 1 or 2 tablets of pyridoxine at bedtime. Or we can also combine pyridoxine and doxylamine oral treatment. This is also oral tablets which can be given at bedtime, so they can be given together or singly as well. And doxylamine is your first generation antihistaminic, H1 antihistaminic agent, which has antiemetic properties also. It's safe to be used in pregnancy. You can start giving it at bedtime. If she's not relieved, you can give it twice daily or even 3 times daily. You can titrate the dose according to the response as well. Other drugs which can be used safely are also the other antihistaminic agents which have antiemetic properties, like diphenhydramine is also safe. You can use oral this is also oral treatment, oral metoclopramide and oral ondansetron. They are also considered safe to be used in OPD basis. So Pyridoxine, doxylamine, this is usually the go-to regimen that we give to begin with. And if she's not relieved on pyridoxine as well as doxylamine, then we can add other drugs depending upon the requirement. Otherwise, there's no need to directly start with ondansetron metoclopramide. So your first choice should definitely be, as far as the drug treatment goes, should definitely be pyridoxine and doxylamine, and along with a dietary modification should definitely be put into place. So friends, this is about the management, and this is about the case scenario based approach for dealing with or for identifying hyperemesis gravidarum in pregnancy. Thank you for watching this video. You can check out the special classes that I've already undertaken on the platform. There are various capsule courses. There's a capsule course on high-risk pregnancy, gynae oncology, clinical situations in early pregnancy. There's an entire capsule course on labor and its complications, another one on reproductive gynecology. These are various capsule courses which you can access once you take up the plus courses, and you can subscribe to them using my referral code, which will allow you to access a 10% discount also on your subscription packages, friends. So thank you so much. Thank you for watching, and any topics, any subjects that you need revised, please feel free to put it on the comment box. Any topics that you need to be discussed, I welcome all your suggestions. So keep watching, keep learning. Bye bye guys, have a great day.